Welcome to this meeting, which is really an important meeting because very soon we are going to be seeing the G20 gathering of world leaders. And this time it's being hosted in Saudi Arabia. And it's an opportune moment for those of us who care about human rights to use our power to say that this is an opportunity to actually do something vital and important for the human rights of those who are in jail in Saudi Arabia at this time, and most particularly the women's rights activists who are still in custody 2 years on, having taken a stand about women's rights and about wanting to be able to drive, wanting to be able to travel without having to succumb to the guardianship program, without having to have permission just to exist in that secondary status. And the imprisonment of those people has gone under the radar because the Saudi Arabia leadership, the kingdom, has claimed that they are modernizing. And yet behind that facade of modernization, now lifting the ban on women driving, making it more possible to travel. The impression to the world is that we're now seeing a different Saudi Arabia. But behind that veneer, I'm afraid there is a really bad story about the women who are detained. Only the other night I was present to watch an award being given to Loujain, one of the women who has been a leading voice for women's rights in Saudi Arabia and who has been now in custody, having been tortured, having experienced deprivation, isolation in prison, and terrible conditions. But she's not the only one. Other women too have suffered. And this is an opportunity for the nations who participate in the G20 to use their leverage and to actually insist upon the detention ending and those women being released from prison at this time. It's not very often that countries can actually have this kind of impact, direct impact. They go to trade meetings with and diplomatic meetings with other nations, and the story we're told is that at those meetings, behind the closed doors, they raise the issues of human rights. We rely upon their good will when they tell us those things, but it doesn't ever seem to create the outcomes that we desire. This is a moment where they say, we will not attend your meeting unless you actually do take steps to raise the position of those women and to release them from custody. This is a moment where we could see whether any of those efforts come to any outcome. And so this meeting is vitally important at this time because of all of that. Now, we've got a wonderful gathering of people who know only too well why the story on human rights in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is not a good story. And I'm going to call upon first Agnes Kalamar, who is the rapporteur on extrajudicial killing, who is has really been an incredible voice for raising the issue of Jamal Khashoggi's murder, the cruel and brutal assassination of a journalist because he dared to criticize the regime in Saudi Arabia. And Agnes Kalamar has become known to the world because she has spoken out so courageously and with such power about the horror of that killing and the failure of the international community to really step in and to use its power in relation to the kingdom. We all are involved in trading relations with the kingdom, and we could very easily say we do not trade with people who do this kind of thing. But I'm afraid there has been a lack of courage on the part of many of those who've been complicit by remaining silent. So Agnes Kalamar, I'm going to invite you first of all to speak, and then I will call upon Hatice Cengiz to tell us about the terrible tragedy that has come into her life with the murder of her fiancé. Agnes.
Thank you very much, Baroness Kennedy, for these kind and generous words, and thank you for the invitation. A few days before the G20, the virtual G20 meeting is supposed to be held, hosted by Riyadh. We, I think, are meeting today to speak about justice and to talk about the role of the international community in the delivery of justice when the national judicial system and the governance systems are so ill-equipped, unable or unwilling to deliver justice. And this is exactly the situation we are confronting. It is evident that to lead the search for justice, justice for Jamal, justice for Lujain, justice for Yemen, in the hands of the judicial system of Saudi Arabia that is so vulnerable to political interference, which operate so far from compliance with basic principles of the rule of law. Leaving justice in those hands would be to abandon our search for justice. And that would be a blow to justice for many, not only in Saudi Arabia, but beyond. I think we need to go and look beyond the usual path and our usual understanding of accountability. Of course, when we speak of justice, we want to see killers, we want to see torturers facing prosecution, judgment, and sentencing. But the grave implications of the crimes committed by Saudi Arabia extend far beyond the authority of the courtrooms alone, and other pathways must be pursued: political, economic, symbolic, including at the international level. So before talking about what the G20 should do, let me begin by highlighting what justice is not, and what the alternative pathways to justice is not. The Osaka G20 meeting was not justice for the victims of Saudi Arabia. It was not respectful to the victims. It was not justice for anyone, and it damaged. It false legitimacy to the illegitimate, and it not only tolerate killings, torture, and arbitrary detention, and possibly killers, it embraces them. And I have in mind here the shameful photo taken during that meeting of heads of state smiling and waving to the camera, while two of them in particular were shaking hands in the center of the photo. That is not justice, and that is not what a G20 should stand for. That is the instrumentalization of the G20 for goals, for objectives that had nothing to do with the initial mandate of the G20. But people who participated to that photo, they allowed themselves to be instrumentalized. And we don't want that to be repeated. In a few days from now, many of the people present in Osaka and who smiled on that shameful photo, not all of them, but many of those very people will be meeting again virtually from their respective offices and countries. That virtual meeting will be hosted by Riyadh, by the King Salman and his Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. There could be virtual smiles. There could be a virtual photo. And the fact that Saudi Arabia, because of a tragic global accident called COVID-19, is not able to milk as much as it could have in terms of image, legitimacy, and power, that does not mean that those present do not have a responsibility and a role to play in ensuring that there should be no repeat of Osaka. The fact that it is virtual does not mean that there could not be a so-called Riyadh moment. And that, distinguished guest, will be the antithesis of justice for Jamal, for Lujain, for Yemen, for the thousands that have been killed there, the countless victims of the worst ever humanitarian and human rights crisis in the world. Truth-telling, on the other hand, that is justice for all those victims, the one we can name and the one we cannot name. The truth those behind the potential Riyadh moment do not wish you and us to say. The truth they do not wish you and us to remind the world about. The truth is that no country should be able to buy their way out of accountability, no matter their influence, strategic relevance, no matter the nature of their friendship. Geostrategic and economic relationships demand trust, require common understanding, should be rooted in core values. Absent those, relationships are all but fiction. Truth is what must be told during the virtual Riyadh. It is shameful, let me say first, that the most powerful countries in the world should have agreed to this gathering, while the host countries and prisoners of conscience, journalists, defenders, activists, women whose sole crime is to think for themselves, when the host country has killed and dismembered one of its star journalists. But if you are going to be there, protected by the safe distance and the screen of your computer, please speak up. You should not be a fearful subject waving at the world camera. Do not smile to the camera of your Zoom or whatever is going to be used. Speak for those imprisoned. Speak for the dead. Speak for those that have been targeted and dismembered by the state or blown to pieces by their bombs. Say their name. Jamal Khashoggi, Yemen, Lujain al-Assaoul, Samar Badawi, Nassima al-Sada, Nouf Abdulaziz, Maya al-Zahrani. Think of these men and women who could be your sons and daughters, who are dead or who are languishing in prison, not for anything they have done, not for any violence they may have used, but because, distinguished representative, because they took their pens or they took their computers and they wrote and they shared. Remember that the men you are about to embrace virtually, they have ordered those children, your children, to be tortured. And when you sign deals at the bottom of the page, plenty of money, remember that those deals are spelled in blood. And please don't. Move away from the embrace. Put the pen down. Move away from the screen. Say their names again and again. And please, please do not smile. Thank you very much.
Agnes, powerful and strong as always. And I'm now going to move to you, Hatice. And I know that Agnes has become a very close and supportive colleague and friend to you since all of this terrible event in your life. And I'd like you to tell us why you too are asking the G20 to have these thoughts in their minds before they think of engaging in this meeting.
Okay, first of all, thank you again for this invitation, Helena Kennedy, and for very great speech for Agnes Kalamard. Always her speeches are very unusual, and it's very impressed. So, and she is supporting me, and she supports Justice and Jamal Sprit and the whole these people right now in jail in Saudi Arabia. We are seeking justice, all of them. Now, there are a lot of things I can't say, but I'll be more realistic today. I have a very clear message today to say or to tell you. I am honored and most grateful for this opportunity to address the British Parliament. I wish I could be with you in person today, but these times are difficult for all of us. I used to live in London, by the way, and I loved it. And I hope I can visit soon when life is normal again and able to shake your hands. The British Prime Minister and your government will in only a few days be participating in G20 summit hosted by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia. I am here to urge the Prime Minister to refuse the Crown Prince invitation. I ask that you do not sit at the virtual table with him. He is not a man you want to be friends with and to shake his hand as though life is normal. The Crown Prince must be challenged fearlessly over the shocking murder of my Jamal. He must feel that the consequences are severe and momentous. It is not enough to place some sanctions on some of those around him, as the UK government has done. He must be sanctioned for his role in ordering and overseeing the gruesome killing. He must be punished. I implore the UK government to say this to him publicly at the G20 summit. If you insist to go ahead and participate, it will be the elephant in the room at the summit. Do not pretend that there has been no murder. This is not easy for me. I never expected to have to address the British Parliament on such grave and painful matters. I want closure. That can only happen with knowing the truth and getting justice. All G20 governments can make this happen. It is not fantasy that time will dissolve. For me, for all of us, it is our moral duty to solve this case. How could we live with ourselves otherwise and go on? Okay, there is no point to impose sanctions that have no teeth and bite. It must not be done merely to say it has been done. Do it for the right and just reasons. And make sure that murderers and torturers pay the price for their inhumanity. The UK should let its higher standards of fairness and honor shine through to give us all real hope. Set the example. Do not shirk this responsibility. Use the leverage the UK has over the Saudi leaders and authorities to stop human rights abuses. And do not smell arms to them which will be used to harm civilians and crush dissent. The Saudi Crown Prince was rightly blocked from buying a football club in Britain. He should be stopped from coming to the UK, full stop. The British government should not deal with the Crown Prince like a friend and lie. Don't let him seduce you with his trade and finances. The truth is that he is a murderer and torturer. If you befriend him, you become complicit in his dirty business. I ask you to listen seriously to my appeals to you. Do not say, "We hear you, Hatice," and then do nothing. Or pretend something is done which is still nothing. You have a chance to make a real difference in the world. Do what is right to bring justice to this case. Thank you very much, Helena and Agnes again.
Hatice, you fill me with such admiration, because after such a terrible loss and having to live with the pain of that experience and the brutality of it, you have become such an important voice for human rights. And I remember you when you couldn't really speak English at all, and you've put yourself to work over the last 2 years acquiring language so that you can speak about the horrors which you've spoken about today. And I just feel such pride in you. You're an amazing woman, and you make my heart sing really when I listen to you, because
I'm trying to best my, there is a lot of things I can say, but the situation is now more politics. So then I told something is very important for those guys now listening to us, and they should listen to us very carefully. And then my message is so clear. By the way, you mentioned about my situation. I did not choose this situation as a human rights voice, or they made me fighter. They made me like activists. They say they call activists, but I wasn't able to tell my private life to people. And the life sometimes takes you very different stage from your life to, I'm fighting with them between waves. The everyday comes a very deep and very high and very, you understand what I mean.
I know.
Thank you very much. You and Agnes, again to you, and all the speakers, they support me, and still they are on the line. And I want to thank all of you guys.
Is Rodney, your lawyer, there with you? Because he has been a great...
He is with me.
And perhaps we could ask Rodney to come in now. Rodney.
Good afternoon all.
It's very lovely to see you too. And you have been a great voice and a great legal expert about the human rights abuses in this part of the world. And perhaps you'd like to address everyone today.
Yes, thank you very much. It really bears emphasis that both under international law and our domestic laws, that the truly barbaric acts that were perpetrated against Jamal Khashoggi have been criminalized for so long. They are not crimes that are limited by borders and that can just be labeled as internal matters. We often hear from certain leaders going to G20 summits that you should keep your noses out of our internal business. Well, Saudi Arabia is wrong to assert that its national so-called trial has settled this case and that everyone should now go away. Firstly, because as we've heard, the national proceedings were hopelessly inadequate and conducted entirely in secret. But secondly, also because these crimes are international. They have truly shocked and concerned all of our nations and require investigation and prosecution to the highest level, wherever the evidence leads. The G20 leaders should better than anyone know the applicable international law, and they should certainly be taking the lead to respect the law. In other situations, I'm thinking here of the ad hoc tribunals for Yugoslavia and Rwanda and others. World leaders have previously insisted that those accused of international crimes should not remain in office and in their positions of power. And exactly the same principle should apply to the Crown Prince and those around him, given the very serious allegations that have been leveled, backed up by evidence from the United Nations and intelligence services from around the world. On behalf of Hatice, we will continue to pursue the need for an independent and impartial criminal trial to hold those who are responsible to account. And we would call on all British MPs and parliamentarians around the world to support that initiative, whether it be through a specialized international court for that purpose, or through universal jurisdiction. If any of these persons travel to our countries, we should use our existing laws to arrest and prosecute them. And also through civil actions as well, as has recently been launched in the United States, which can serve a valuable purpose in revealing the truth about what happened. When it was thought that it was not possible to arrest and prosecute world leaders, going back to the period after the Second World War, and then more recently, as I've mentioned, in countries like the former Yugoslavia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, in all of these situations when we thought it couldn't happen, in the end, those in charge were investigated and were prosecuted. The bubble was burst, and it was shown that those who thought they could get away with it did not in the end succeed. They have been brought to book. We trust that the world leaders who will be logging on to their Zoom screens, much like we are doing at the moment in Riyadh on the weekend, if they do go, that they will show the same historic resolve and commitment to the noble principles of international justice. Thank you.
Rodney, thank you so much. You're a great champion of human rights and a great lawyer, and it's wonderful the work that you do. Now, I've got two more speakers, and I'm going to take us first of all to Brian Fogel. Brian has made a documentary. He's a renowned a documentary filmmaker, a prize-winning filmmaker, and it's great to have you with us, Brian. And I just wanted you to talk about the great project of making this film about Jamal Khashoggi, about Hatice, about the events which have haunted us since 2 years ago.
Thank you, Lady Kennedy. Again, I'm Brian Fogel. I embarked 2 years ago on making a documentary feature film called The Dissident that will release here in the United States in the middle of December, and will release in the UK and Germany and most of Europe sometime around middle of January, February, because of the delays with COVID. But the film focuses around the untold story as we are positioning it of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And in telling this story, I developed a relationship with Hatija, with Omar Abdulaziz in Canada, the Saudi dissident, whose brothers and friends remain imprisoned for 2 years now, tortured without charges simply for knowing Omar and in some cases, retweeting his thoughts regarding the kingdom, and also with the Turkish prosecutors and examiners that worked on the Khashoggi case. And I set out to make the film because I saw that there was not justice happening for Jamal, and that there was complicity among members of the G20 to essentially give a slap on the wrist to the kingdom without taking any action. And in working with Hatija and her incredible fight for justice for Jamal, Agnes Calamar, who is also a big part of the film, and her very, very thorough investigation into Jamal's murder. It is my hope that this film, as it gets to be seen and available around the world, will serve as a rallying call, a call to action among not only leaders of the G20, but their populations, to reconsider its business ties with the kingdom until these human rights abuses have been changed, and that not only that women's rights change, but also that murders such as Jamal Khashoggi can no longer happen. I did a film 2 years ago called Icarus, and the film revealed Russia's decades-long doping scandal of how they cheated not only Olympic Games, but international sports for decades. And when the film Icarus came out in August 2017, Russia was still going to the Olympics. And 5 months later, the power of that film led to the IOC banning Russia from the 2018 Pyeongchang Games, and what was likely going to be a ban for the 2020 Summer Games should have happened. The film went on to win the Academy Award, and that impact of the film allowed to meaningful change. So I'm hoping that The Dissident has the strength to follow in that path, to have real meaningful change, and I'm working with Hatija and Agnes, who are paramount to this story. I believe that this film can serve as a rallying call.
Brian, it's so important that there are people like you who make this real in many ways and visual, and take it to audiences of people who would normally perhaps never get to hear about the horror of what happened to Jamal Khashoggi. And I pay tribute to you. I know that you're already a celebrated filmmaker, but you really have changed human rights in already in many ways, and I know that this film is going to make a great difference. I just know it. So my tribute to you as well. And then I'm going to take us over now to Thor Halvorson. You only have to know him as Thor. He's a great leader of a human rights NGO in the United States. Thor, are you there? Can you come in and join us?
I'm right here. I can in fact join you.
Great. Please, over to you.
Well, I think on the one hand,
You're able to turn on your video, Thor?
At this time I can't. Is it? I mean, I can join you guys in about 6 or 7 minutes if you can handle it between now and then. Would that be okay, Lady Kennedy?
I'm happy to have you without the camera, and then later on when we have some questions, then you can maybe by that time be able to join us by camera, but just go ahead talking to us now. Time is of the essence, unfortunately.
Okay, then I appreciate. I guess without an image, I can I guess symbolize some of what is being suffered, currently by so many people in prison in Saudi Arabia. The making of this film is something that the Human Rights Foundation thought was absolutely crucial. It is so important to communicate not just the brutality of this murder, but to also humanize Jamal Khashoggi for who he was and what he represented. And the film does it really, really well. And I encourage everyone that is able to tune into this to find a way of seeing this film either when it comes out in a few weeks or through one of the special screenings. The filmmaker Brian Fogel has done such a tremendously good job at communicating the story behind the story in terms of the murder itself. It also highlights the work of activists, as well as gives us a very real sense of what these sorts of decisions by MBS and his government actually represent in terms of the human cost. The fact that the G20 meeting is going forward, the fact that these governments are actually not boycotting is such an outrage, because they actually have the intelligence and they know what actually happened. But if you put aside the horrific murder of Jamal Khashoggi, there is, as Lady Kennedy has pointed out, all of the circumstances involving people who are in prison for doing nothing more than asking for the equality for women. It boggles the mind that this has occurred. So the Human Rights Foundation is absolutely grateful that we've had this opportunity to involve ourselves with this film, and we will see it through to the very end, despite all of the difficulties that are represented by COVID, despite the ongoing campaign of disinformation by the Saudi dictatorship, as well as the pressure that they have exerted on distributors like Netflix and Amazon to not show this film, to not distribute this film, which is also an absolute outrage. To see how so many Western companies and other concerns have essentially bowed to the dictatorship of Saudi Arabia. I think that pretty much concludes what I'd like to say on behalf of the Human Rights Foundation on this matter.
So I want to thank you and for all the good work you do and the foundation does. It really is a shocking business that there in Saudi Arabia, the things that we so take for granted. Lou Jane, for example, and the other women who are there just now, if you see documented the allegations that are made against them, because they say this is not just somebody who drove a motor car. This is somebody who was taking funding from foreign entities. And it turned out that that means receiving an invitation to speak at a conference abroad and the offer of a ticket and accommodation while you're there. And there probably isn't any one of us who haven't on occasion spoken at a conference somewhere and only been able to do it if you're involved in things. You would only be able to do those travels if you had a ticket sent to you and so on. So that was it was considered there was something corrupt in all of that there was some sort of collusion with foreign governments. A young woman applied for a job at the UN, and that was considered to be a contravention because permissions and appropriate things had not been sought before even inquiring about the role. Incredible allegations about merely expressing desires about wanting change and wanting equality, seen as being an undermining of the kingdom and the constitutional arrangements of the kingdom. and a challenge to Sharia law. When any of us who have friends who are lawyers in the Sharia tradition know that that is a distortion of true Islam. So the things that are used to silence women, to keep women in their place, to refuse women their equal rights, these are the shocking parts of the stories of these women. And the men who support them, because there are men in prison too who are human rights activists, but who were there supporting these women in their desire for equality and desire for change. So it's important for people to understand that when the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia claim that these women are there for criminal offences, the criminal offences would not in any way amount to criminal offences in any civilized place. And so it should be a source of shame to Saudi Arabia that they're doing this to these women, because they're asking for no more than we would expect that human beings should have as part of their fulfillment as humans, and irrespective of gender or anything else. So it is a shocking thing that a country that is claiming itself as modernizing and stepping into modernity should be doing this to people who are only asking and yearning for fairness and justice. So is there anyone else who would like to come in? Nicolo Figa Talamanca has been a wonderful champion of human rights in Europe, and I pay tribute to him for helping us organize this event, and to the others for participating. Now, are there any questions that are coming through? Is there anybody sending anything through? Not that I can see. Would anyone else like to make a comment? Agnes, would you like to say anything about the award that was given to Lujane the other night? Because you gave a wonderful dedication to her at the Magnitsky Awards, which are human rights awards which are given in the memory of Sergei Magnitsky, who was a lawyer who was murdered in custody in Russia. And Bill Browder, who was his client, has established these awards in his name, and they are given to people who are really either suffering the consequences of seeking human rights for people, activists and lawyers and different people, parliamentarians who are committing themselves and fighting for human rights too. Agnes, tell us a little bit about the event.
Well, thank you very much, Elena, Baroness. Look, I think before moving to Lujan, I think the point I would like to make immediately is with regard to the American elections, and with regard to the fact that right now, in front of the American government, there are Senate and US Congress resolution that concern Saudi Arabia. Very important resolutions. I want to give credit to the American Parliament, because of all parliaments around the world, it is the only one that has tried to move away just from the rhetoric of denunciation into an action mode. And by demanding accountability for the killing of Jamal, by demanding accountability for the multiple killings in Yemen, including by imposing an embargo on the sale of weapons from the US, and demanding that the CIA and other intelligence, American intelligence agencies release information they have regarding the responsibility of Mohammed bin Salman. These are very important resolutions on the part of both Republican and Democrats. They were vetoed by the White House, who has become one of Mohammed bin Salman's strongest allies, along with the UK and France, I will say. We are now moving within a few months with a different White House. And that to me is an opportunity for the United States and the new government to signal to Saudi Arabia that it is not going to be business as usual. The first step that could be taken, should be taken in that direction by the new White House is to stop imposing a veto on those very important resolutions. And what this will lead to is truth-telling. The National Director of Intelligence, the NDI, has been requested to provide detailed information on what the intelligence tell them about the responsibility of Mohammed bin Salman. That is something that the White House must allow to go through the minute they are in power, the new government. Alongside that very important truth-telling move, there should be, as Atiche has mentioned as well, as an end to the sale of weapons that are used for gross and serious human rights violations in Yemen, documented, evidenced repeatedly by the United Nations, indeed by the Security Council itself. So we need to see actions taken, and by the White House allowing those resolutions to go forward, I think, and I'm hoping, that it is going to take and bring other governments out of the paralysis that they have allowed themselves to be stuck into. We need to see far greater move on the part of parliaments and governments prepared to challenge governments with whom they have a strategic relationship, but prepared to challenge them over those extremely serious human rights violations, because that's not the basis for partnership in a world that is so at war with itself at the moment, in an international system that is seeking to redefine the rules of the game. We need to be able to stand firm on those values. So I don't know what's going to happen over the weekend, but I do know what the people of the United States have done, and they've done us a tremendous, tremendous favor. They've sent a very strong signal. It is now up to the White House, that will be in power in a couple of months, to take action on what the people of the United States have asked them. So I wanted to make that, and to ask other governments around the world, other parliaments in particular. It's one thing for the governments to feel, oh gosh, there are too many deals and we need the money. Parliaments hold the values of the people who elect them. Parliaments must be able to stand firm on those issues, and yet, with a few exceptions, they have not been present on that dossier as much as we should have expected them. So please, parliaments from around the world, you are an important actor in the protection of the international human rights system and in the protection of human rights norm, and you cannot give up on that role. I'm hoping that you will follow suit on what others have done. And just to say about Lou Jane, I had this immense privilege of giving Lou Jane the Global Magnitsky Award a couple of days ago. Give it to her in dream, give it to her in thought, but give it to her nevertheless, because there is no one who more deserves that award than this young woman who stood up just, to speak, to think for herself, to drive, to claim her citizenhood, to claim her personhood, to claim her equality, and to do that without being told. To do that on her own. That's what the Mohammed bin Salman of the world cannot stand. They don't mind if you follow what they ask you to do. But here was a young woman that just said, I don't care, I don't need you to tell me what to think. In fact, look at me. I've made those claims before you, the pretender, the person who pretends to hold modernity values. I made that claims before you did, and what happened to me? You put me in jail. She allowed us to see the emperor for what he is, naked, naked, naked. There is no pretense there. The man is naked. There is no modernity values behind the man. There is just a search for autocratic ruling. That's what she has shown us. That's what she has done. And that's why we need to protect her. That's why people next weekend must speak for her. They must speak for all those young women who dare stand up for those basic values. They cannot be silent and they cannot smile to the camera.
And yes, that was the rallying cry that you gave, and that was the rallying cry I wanted to echo in people's ears as we concluded this meeting, because there's a nakedness in the complicit too, that they allow that this naked emperor of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to walk amongst them, head held high, as if he were not involved in the most appalling abuses of human rights. And by allowing that and playing his game, they themselves walk naked amongst us, because they are unworthy if they do not call out and use this moment to call out what is being done in the kingdom at this time. So I hope that you will all take that message back and really think hard about trying to persuade those who are invited to attend to use it, and to use it now through diplomatic channels, to say, I'll only turn up if you actually do something about these women activists who want their rights. And so I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank my wonderful speakers. I want to thank especially our teacher, Cengiz, who has joined us today and who's gone through so much. I want to thank Agnes for her championing of these cases. I want to thank Brian and all of our colleagues for the work that they do. And so thank you again. And let's hope that we get some purchase here, and that we get some leverage on this abuser of human rights. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you. Thank you.